great big star on his chest. Out from all of the rest. Fastest gun in the West. Yippee-yi-yo, Coyote, riding around your way. Here comes quick draw McGraw. The highfalutinist, fastest shootingest cowboy you ever saw. That's quick draw McGraw.
You never know who you're going to run into while you're walking down the street. Our next guest is in from Dublin, Ireland. He has braved the cold and the icy weather. He's in for the winter warm-up with the St. Louis Cardinals. He is a managing director of
Cotinos, that's it.
Cotinos Partners in Dublin, Iowa. He's a managing director, and you are going to be giving a number of presentations at Ballpark Village. Brian McNeese, welcome to Big 550 KTRS.
Thanks for having me. I'm really pleased to be here.
And you can just read the phone book with that Irish accent, because that is the best. Now, you have written a book called Powerhouse, and you are a business consultant. And I don't want to steal your thunder, but you did a investigation of successful companies all around the world, and one of them you picked was the St. Louis Cardinals.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so my business is I'm a consultant, as you say, and I help organizations perform better, try and improve business performance. So one of the things that we did was we wanted to try and understand, well, what does high performance look like in an organizational context? And to get underneath the skin of that, we traveled the world to find the best organizations, the best run organizations, not just in business, in sport, in science, in education, the arts, etc. The book has pulled all of those kind of case studies from those organizations together. And as you say, one of them was the St. Louis Cardinals, because it's a fantastically well-run organization.
Did they call you? You call them? How did the partnership happen?
I called them.
You called them out of the blue?
Yeah, I called them out of the blue. So they got a random call from a guy from Ireland to say, hey, I want to come and visit you. I want to understand how you have become such a high-performing organization. And they were a bit intrigued. They looked at some of the other case studies that we were featuring in it, and they said, yeah, we'd love to be part of that. And
how does a guy grows up in Dublin, Ireland, know about the St. Louis Cardinals?
So I'm kind of nuts about sport, any sport. I'll watch any sport. One of my sports is cricket. So for the last 8 years, I've been a national team selector for the Irish cricket team. And so cricket and baseball, there's some kind of crossover.
There's no crossover.
Oh, there is.
You watch cricket, it looks like a Chinese fire drill. There's nothing that cricket and baseball are the same. But anyway.
Yeah. Well, so they bowl, they bat, they throw the ball. So there are some crossover stuff. So I've always been interested in baseball, and I was aware of the Cardinals being a very successful team on the field. And then when I started to research some of the organizations that we wanted to study, I looked into a little bit more about, well, what are the best run sports franchises in the States? And every time I kept coming back to the Cardinals, and I went, okay, one, they're very successful on the field, but two, they're a really, really sharply run organization, business organization as well. And so that's why they've made it into the book.
The book is called Powerhouse, and you're going to be giving this presentation throughout the weekend at Busch Day, for the winter warm-up?
Yeah, so I'm presenting each day of the winter warm-up. So I'm really looking forward to meeting some of the Cardinals fans and talking about why their ball club is such a great organization.
And, of course, tickets available and everything else. All right, so the book is Powerhouse. You looked at the Cardinals. What were some of the other companies you looked at?
So as I said, it's a real diverse mix. So we went from everything to the Kirov Ballet in Russia, the Finnish state school education system, which is one of the best in the world. The other sports organization that we looked at was the New Zealand All Blacks rugby team, which is the most successful international team in any sport. They've got a 80% win record over 100 years. We looked at Southwest Airlines. We looked at the US Marines. We looked at Tata in India. We looked at the Grameen Bank in Bangladesh, which is the only corporate entity to ever win the Nobel Peace Prize. We looked at Doctors Without Borders, Médecins Sans Frontières as I would know it, but here it's called Doctors Without Borders, humanitarian aid agency.
What do you call it in Ireland?
Médecins Sans Frontières. That's the French name for it.
Okay.
So it means Doctors Without Borders.
Because it started in France.
It was started in France,
okay.
yeah.
Give us a couple of things that you noticed that were similar between these diverse businesses.
So each of the businesses all share a number of characteristics. One, they have a sense of a real strong sense of purpose. So they understand where they're trying to get to. They have an underlying sense of ambition to achieve great things. They've got a real sharp sense of clarity of focus, alignment across the organization. So for the Cardinals, for example, that's articulated on the baseball side of things in this document called The Cardinal Way. And it's not that they've figured out a way to play baseball that's different to everybody else. It's more that they get everybody on the same page, understanding here's what we're about, here's what we do. And when you do that in an organization, that leads to high performance.
They do that with the manager and the second baseman and the shortstop and the catcher. Do they do that with the secretary who's answering the phones in the ticket office?
Yeah, they do. Yeah. So what you find is the values and behaviors that contribute to a successful baseball team on the field are exactly the same as what's required for the front office staff. And the Cardinals are just brilliant at making sure that people are aligned, operating to high standards. They work in partnership with their service providers. There's just so many different things that they do really, really well. That's why they stand up on a par with all the other organizations that we looked at.
Brian McNeese, it sounds so simple. Everyone on the same page. Why is that so hard for other businesses to understand?
You'd be amazed how difficult it is, particularly in larger organizations, to get everybody aligned. And you're right, it is simple. And like the 12 principles that we talk about in the book, they're all common sense stuff. There's no earth-shattering kind of insights there. But unfortunately, the one thing about common sense is it doesn't always.
So what you're saying is it is easier said than done.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah,
because everyone has their own personal agenda. My own beef. I should have gotten the job. No, I'm upset that I should have done this, or I don't like you, so I'm going to be mean to you. I'm going to badmouth that guy. And that's how organizations fall apart.
Yeah, that's some of the reasons. Yeah, so you get lots of misalignment happening. People just don't understand what the kind of priorities are, what we should be doing. Very often, you find kind of behaviors that are off kilter. What's interesting about all the organizations that we studied, they're all very strongly values driven. There's a core set of values that underpin them, and they're lived day in, day out. Lots of organizations have these value statements, but they mean nothing.
Did the Cardinals or a company, other one of the other companies, because it's not just the Cardinals in this book, but one of the other companies do something that was so outside of the box that only worked for them, or that you were like, wow, I never thought of that? Well,
so yeah, and again, we came across lots of examples of this. To give you one that's probably a little bit obscure for your listeners, the Grameen Bank in Bangladesh, as I said before, it's the only corporate entity to win the Nobel Peace Prize. So Bangladesh is a very, very poor country. The Grameen Bank was set up by Dr. Muhammad Yunus, an economics professor, and he decided he was going to give microloans to people below the poverty line to try and help them improve their situation in life. And of course, when he decided to do this, he was told, "You're nuts. They're not going to pay you back." He exclusively lends to women in Bangladeshi society. Again, that's something that just broke the mold completely. And by the way, this isn't a charitable organization. This is a corporate entity that's profit making. And so he very much broke the mold because he had a very different vision for what kind of credit could do to bring people out of poverty. And so you find lots of examples of that in the powerhouse examples that we have. Lots of examples of people doing things very, very differently in order to become high performing.
Did these microloans pay off?
Yeah. So they have a 98% loan recovery rate. Any bank in this country would kill for 98%.
Right, they don't get 98% when they give it to legitimate people.
Yeah, so these are people who are assetless. They have no assets to underwrite the loan. But they pay back, and it's because of the business model that he set up and the kind of the values that are incorporated into it and how it's done. And again, that's what I come back to all the time. Powerhouse organizations do things a little bit differently. They have a very clear focus about what they're trying to do, why they're trying to do it, and that's part of the reason that they're so successful.
Well, let's go back to the Cardinals. Because the Cardinals are different. If you're talking about Southwest Bank, right? The stewardess and the pilots aren't as different as, and the front office of Southwest Bank isn't as different as a pitcher and the person in charge of tickets and or banquets, right? I mean, it seems like the Cardinals have two different worlds. They have to live in a baseball world and to live in a business world.
Yeah, they do. Yeah. So, and in part, that's what made it really interesting to study. and to see the overlaps between the two different worlds that they live in. As you say, Southwest Airlines, you're right, everybody is kind of, they're all in the airline business.
Right.
Whereas with the Cardinals, you've got people who are kind of, the way the front office describe their role, they talk about it. We're in the memory business. We're in the business of creating memories for fans and connections for fans, and that's what keeps them coming back in their droves. 3.5 million plus people go to Busch Stadium every season.
Right.
Whereas the guys on the team itself, their focus obviously is winning the next World Series. But yet, when we kind of studied it in detail, we found that commitment to excellence, behavior driven, one of the things that the baseball side of the operations really focus on are the characters of the past, the Stan Musials of this world. And they use those as examples to the current crop of players, and they say, this is how you become a great ball player. These are the behaviors that go with that. These are the values. This is the work ethic that goes with that. And then you go into the front office and you hear very similar stories being told about people who've been successful within the business world as well. And so you see, actually, they're not really that different after all.
So they might talk about Stan Musial on the field, but a Mark Lamping off the field or something.
Exactly.
Did you deal with any tech companies? Because it seems like tech companies break the mold in that they don't make any money. They don't really sell anything. They give away everything for free, and their valuations of their stock is through the roof. Did you look at any companies a little like that?
Yeah, so I was very skeptical of including any tech companies in the book. One of the criteria that we used for selecting the case studies that we picked was that they all need to be enduring high performance. In other words, they've been performing relative to their peers at a top level for decades. And so I'm a little nervous about picking a tech company that didn't exist 15 years ago, and that mightn't exist in 15 years' time.
Right. As a business consultant, Brian McNeese, our guest, he's managing director of Cotinos, yeah. Cotinos, which is, what is that?
So Cotinos, it's a Greek term. So our business is all about high performance.
So an Irishman from Dublin names his company after a Greek term.
Hey,
makes sense.
We're all Europeans. But yeah, so the Cotinos is the olive wreath that they used to put on the head of the winner of the ancient Olympics. So it was what the equivalent of a gold medal before they gave out gold medals.
Right.
So we've got a golden Cotinos as our corporate.
And the reason for that is why?
It's because it's a representation of high performance.
Yeah. Okay, so when you were looking at the Cardinals and these other businesses, I had a really good question, and then I blew it. Brian McNeese, our guest, managing director of Cotinos Partners in Dublin, Ireland. He's going to be in St. Louis. He's in St. Louis for the winter warm-up. He's going to give a presentation on the what you found in the book and what you found looking at the Cardinals. Powerhouse is the book. Bookstores everywhere. I'm sure we can get it tomorrow as well.
Yeah, so I have copies with me, so people can get it at the winter warm-up, and obviously it's available online, etc. So you'll be able to find it.
The book is called Powerhouse. When you were looking at these companies, it's very easy for a company to put its best foot forward. Right? Here's a guy coming in. We want to show him all the cool stuff, but we want to hide all the bad stuff.
Yeah.
So how did you go about trying to find out the real story in all of this?
Well, so if I give you an example of my time with the Cardinals. So I came at the tail end of the 2015 season.
Okay.
And I deliberately came when there was 2 homestands in a row. So there was a game every night that I was here. And so during the day, I was walking around the organization, interviewing people across the entire organization. And in the evening then, I was shadowing different elements of the operations around match day stuff. And so when you spend time, at that level, you start to see stuff, warts and all. And so you can pretty quickly get a sense as to whether, there's smoke and mirrors here. And, every time I looked at stuff with the Cardinals, I just kept kind of shaking my head going, wow, this is such a well-run organization.
What's the one thing you left saying, wow, I had no idea that they did that?
Oh God, it's hard to pick one. It really is hard to pick one. So one of the interactions that I had on one of the nights, I think the Brewers were in town.
The Brewers are always in town.
Yeah, and
It's a problem.
So before the game, the ushers in the stadium have a briefing. It lasts for about 15 minutes, and it's a real upbeat meeting. So there's a guy called Jack Stretch who effectively warms up the ushers, and it's very high tempo and kind of and they talk about the game. They talk about who we're playing, what the starting lineup is going to look like, maybe even tactically how we might approach the game. And I was kind of sitting there wondering, why the hell are the ushers having this conversation before a game? So Jack, I said it to Jack after the meeting, and he said, follow one of the ushers and you'll see. So I followed a couple of the ushers, and the stadium opens up, the fans are starting to come in. And as the ushers are interacting with the fans, they're talking about, hey, this is our starting lineup today. Here's tactically how we might, what do you think? How do you think we're going to go? We have the edge over the Brewers for the last while. So the nature of the conversation that they were having was just fundamentally different to what I was expecting an usher to, where I'm from. If you go into a stadium, the usher goes, "Yeah, there's your seat."
Right. Right.
Don't.
Right. Leave me alone.
Leave me alone, basically. Right. Yeah. Whereas here, they're just interacting, and that's a deliberate policy. It's part of how they interact. It's staff engagement, fan engagement with the city. It's a fundamental part of the strategy of the Cardinals, and it comes from the top down. And so that was one element, one aspect of something that kind of surprised me a little bit.
Did you look at any turnaround companies? Did you look at any companies that were going bad and they were able to turn it around?
Yeah, so some of the companies that we featured have been through tough times. So Toyota in Japan is in there, and they had some quality issues, and they based their whole strategy and kind of their DNA was based on quality, and then they had some quality issues. So we looked at how did they go about turning that around. Some of the other organizations have been through tough times. Tata Group, it's there for 150 years in India. A massive conglomerate, one of India's most successful companies. That's been through tough times. Mayo Clinic has been there for 150 years. They've kind of seen their way through kind of recessions and managed to stay on course. So yeah, that featured as part of some of the things. And one of the things that we looked at was organizational resilience and how some of these high-performing organizations maintain resilience despite some of the setbacks that they might incur, difficult market conditions or, other setbacks that occur for any business.
Brian McNeese, our guest, he is going to be at the winter warm-up, managing partner of the Cardinals Partners in Dublin, Ireland. He's a business consultant, came to St. Louis and studied the St. Louis Cardinals as a business, and he's going to be giving that report to the public over the next couple of days at the winter warm-up. We were talking off the air. People don't believe this when I say this, but the term in America to having a half Guinness, half Harp, or a half Guinness and whatever is called a black and a tan. That is a derogatory term in Ireland, is it not?
Yeah, there's a historical context to the black and tans, which doesn't go down well in parts of Ireland.
So when you go to Ireland, don't order a black and tan.
Well, don't call it a black and tan.
Call
it whatever you want, but just don't call it a black and tan.
All right, fair enough. We're bringing a bunch of listeners over to Ireland, and you have officially rolled out the welcome mat for us.
I have, yeah. So when you come over and when your listeners come over, absolutely, I'd love to catch up with you and kind of show you some of the bits of Ireland that other people mightn't show you.
Yes, definitely. The Ireland ambassador from America to Ireland is from St. Louis.
That's right.
Yeah. Did you talk to him about the Cardinals?
No, I didn't. No, I haven't met him actually. So I'd love to catch up with him. And
so you and him aren't going to the same pubs, is what you're saying?
No, we're not. No.
Brian McNeese, managing director with the Cardinals Partners in Dublin, Iowa. It's going to be a fascinating presentation. The book is Powerhouse, and if you're a business guy, you're just interested in how businesses work, the book is called Powerhouse, Amazon.com, also at the winter warm-up this weekend. Thanks for coming in.
Hey, pleasure. Thanks for having me.
You got it. 728, Big 550.